The episode opens with Sheriff Deputy Rick Grimes driving into wreckages on a deserted highway where he stops to go into an abandoned convenience store scavenging for gas. He, unfortunately, sees a notice on the gas station telling him there's no gas, and with a feeling of frustration, Rick turns back to leave, but only to hear a series of shuffling footsteps. He takes a look, but realizing it's a little girl carrying a teddy bear, Rick calls out and offers to help. Well, as luck would have it, the little girl turns out to be a zombie, charging toward Rick as soon as she hears his voice. In the end, Rick, slightly terrified, pulls out his weapon and shoots her straight through the brain. Let's backtrack to where this all started. The next scene reveals Rick and his partner Shane Walsh on duty several weeks earlier discussing Rick's relationship with his wife, Lori. The couple seems to be undergoing a terrible phase in their relationship, and Shane is there to encourage Rick to patiently persist, telling him it's a phase that will surely pass. Just then, they receive a radio call to assist in catching two armed criminals who are being chased down by some officers. Upon receiving the message, the officers drive off to lay down spikes for the oncoming vehicle while also taking cover to ambush the criminals. Meanwhile, a junior officer, Leon, gets distracted thinking highly of the mission, and Rick, having known him to be careless, tells him to ensure that he has loaded his pistol before the pending gunfight and also make sure that his gun's safety is off. Soon enough, the criminals arrive and, without regard for the spikes, run over them, causing the vehicle to flip over. The injured criminals attempt to flee the scene and engage in a gunfight with the police. Rick, who's standing nearest to the vehicle, gets shot at by the first criminal before the other officers take him down. However, since he's wearing a bulletproof vest, he doesn't get hurt. The second criminal is also taken down, making the officers lower their guards. But, all of a sudden, a third man crawls out of the car and shoots Rick from behind before he's gunned down. Rick is then rushed to a hospital. After being in a coma for a while, Rick regains consciousness one day to the blurry image of Shane dropping off flowers during visitation. Happy with the thought that Shane is there with him, Rick speaks back to Shane but doesn't get a response. The flowers beside him seem to have wilted and dried up fast. This is when Rick realizes Shane isn't present. Rather, he's just had a flashback of what really happened, perhaps the most recent of Shane's visits, and perhaps the last visit by anybody at all. He then weakly gets up from the hospital bed only to fall, while also calling out to a nurse for help, unknown to him that he's never going to get any. Outside the ward, he realizes that the entire hospital is in shambles and even finds the half-eaten body of a nurse across the hospital corridor. Plus, heavily secured doors with a warning that it should not be opened. Rick gets scared seeing hands through the door space attempting to force it open and flees into a dark room where he lights a match, which in turn helps him find his way to an exit door. On the outside, Rick is shocked at the sight of a great number of dead bodies littering the floor. Soon, he grabs a bicycle to make his way back home, but in the meantime, a legless zombie cut through the abdomen, one which Rick would never have thought could still be alive, scares him and he quickly zooms off on his bicycle. He gets home soon enough and realizes that his wife and son are missing and sobs, thinking perhaps that he's still in a coma, and maybe what he is experiencing isn't real. Later, while Rick is deep in thought, sitting outside his house, he tries to call out unknowingly to a zombie walking on the street but is knocked out by a boy named Dwayne with a shovel. Soon, Dwayne's father Morgan shows up, first eliminating the walker and next pointing the gun at Rick, demanding to know what kind of wound he's wearing a bandage for. But, since Rick isn't quite himself and doesn't even know how to answer the question, he faints. Rick is however taken into the stranger's hiding place where his bandage is changed, with Dwayne standing next to his bed with a weapon in case Rick becomes a zombie. Morgan then asks him for the last time what kind of wound he has, and Rick answers, saying it's from a gunshot. After being convinced that Rick hasn't been bitten by a zombie, Morgan cuts him loose and invites him to dinner. Understanding that he doesn't know much about the situation, Morgan explains everything to him. When someone gets bitten or scratched, they develop a fever and become a zombie. He also tells Rick the gun he fired earlier that day would have drawn more zombies than usual to the region, so they would be leaving in the morning since the zombies are less active in the daytime. Later that night, they hear a loud alarm from a car and Morgan explains that one of the zombies must have bumped a car on the street. In the meantime, Morgan's zombified wife shows up at the entrance attempting to get into the house as she fiddles with the doorknob all night. After dawn, they leave for Rick's house where he tells Morgan his wife and son are alive. Morgan wonders how he can be so sure, and Rick tells him they had left with their family photo albums. Upon hearing this, they tell Rick that his wife and son must be at a refugee camp in Atlanta because the government had ordered everyone to go there. So Rick decides to travel down to Atlanta to look for the refugee camp, but Morgan would rather stay back. Rick first takes them to the sheriff's headquarters where they all have a hot shower before taking weapons, ammunition and a walkie-talkie for communication after Rick is gone. Before they split, Rick sees the careless and dumb Leon zombified, but he can't bear leaving him in that state, so Rick eliminates him. While Morgan goes back to secure a new camp with Dwayne in the neighborhood, Rick stops to look for the legless zombie he saw on his first day out of his coma and shoots it out of pity. At the same time, Morgan attempts to eliminate his zombified wife but struggles until he can no longer shoot and he leaves her be. As soon as Rick approaches Atlanta, he tries to inform Morgan through the walkie-talkie but can't get through to him. Instead, the radio signal is being picked up by a nearby survivors camp harboring Rick's partner, wife, and son along with other people. After responding to Rick's call, they later realize that the radio signal doesn't get back to him, so he doesn't hear anything. Unaware that it is Rick who's on the other line, Shane goes against Lori's idea of going out alone to put signs on the highway to warn all other survivors about a certain danger in Atlanta, and Lori gets annoyed. Shane later explains to Lori that he doesn't want to put her in danger for anything. Soon, he locks lips with her before Carl later shows up and Lori assures him that she's not going to leave him. In the next scene, Rick runs out of gas and walks down the highway towards a farmhouse to borrow some gas from the house owners. The building seems at first to be deserted until Rick finds out soon that the owners are long dead from eliminating themselves, probably after having been bit or something. He sees the farmer's truck but can't find the key and abandons it. Luckily for him, a horse is in the yard which Rick can ride on his way up into the city. Soon, he gets to a part of the city where there are just a handful of walkers and assures the horse that they can easily outrun them. Further along the road, he finds dead soldiers who must have engaged in warfare with the zombies in the region. Next, he hears a helicopter flying above and finds some hope. He then attempts to trail the chopper, but he runs into a herd of zombies on his way. In great fear and with the hope of knowing the way back, he turns and tries to flee but doesn't make it out as more and more zombies troop out after him. After seizing his horse and ripping it apart, the zombies rush toward him on the floor. Having no other options, Rick crawls under a tank for cover and shoots 4 to 5 of them before giving up, realizing that he obviously won't last long enough. But as he attempts to take his life, his eyes luckily fall on an open hatch beneath the tank and he takes shelter in the armored vehicle. After panting for a while and regaining his breath, Rick grabs a gun from a zombie soldier beside him and blows its brains out in fear, with the sound of the gun temporarily deafening him. Looking up while he groans in pain, Rick also finds that the top hatch is open and rushes to close it before the zombies get to it. Pleased and troubled as he is, Rick sighs deeply as he settles inside the tank. Then after that, he joyously hears a voice through a radio of a man asking if he's quite comfortable in the tank. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.